Hello, and welcome to the second SkillAPI tutorial for the Dynamic Tool. In this tutorial, we'll be covering how to create skills and get them working with classes. If you do not know how to get to the tool, how to use it, or how to create classes, you should probably check out the first tutorial. Alright, to get started with skills, first switch over to the Skill tab, if you're not there already, and then let's start editing our first skill. So we're making a skill for our fighter class right now. So let's make a skill called Hurricane. This will be a skill that deals damage and knocks back things in an area. For the skill type, it's an area around the target or the caster. So let's make it a skill shot AoE. Now this option doesn't actually do anything. It's just more for telling the players what sort of skill they're investing in. Alright, now next is the indicator. This is what type of item is representing your skill. For a Hurricane, since AoE damage based on air, let's give it an iron sword. Alright, now next is the required items. You would use this if you want the player to be holding a specific item in order to use the skill. And with these, you can also use commas to use multiple skills, like if I do apple and then comma dirt. It would require either one of these items. For this, I'm not going to put anything there because I don't want to require anything. So I'll move on to the next option, which is maximum level. This is how many times your skill can be upgraded. By default, this is set to 5, and that's generally where I like to keep it, but you can do any amount you want depending on how many times you want the skill to improve, or how much points you want the player to invest in the skill to get it up there. Just find a comfortable value for how you want your server to end up. Alright, next is the description of the skill. This is your explanatory text describing what exactly your skill does. So for this, since we're doing damage and knocking back things in the area, I'll pretty much write that down in the description. Alright. So once you have your description, now you can move on to the skill properties. The first one is what level is required to unlock the skill. Since this is a fairly basic skill, let's start off at level 5. Now the second option is, again, how much additional levels you need for each rank of the skill. I'll keep that at 1, the default value. Next is how many skill points it requires to upgrade the skill. I generally keep this at 1 without increasing per level, just so that you have a skill point, you can upgrade the skill. Again, you can do whatever value you want there. This is just like what I prefer. Mana cost is how much mana is needed to use the skill. For this one, it's an AoE. Let's put it up near the max mana for fighters since they can't cast many skills. Let's make it 10. Lastly is the cooldown of the skill. How many seconds in between each cast? And again, you can use decimals here if you want. But for this one, I'll make it, let's say, 15 seconds. Alright, so once you have those set, the only option left is what skill is required. Now, for your beginning skills, when you get to the beginning of the game, you won't set this, because this is what skill needs to be upgraded before you can invest in this one. So say we have another skill, I'll just make it real quick, skill 1. And Hurricane requires skill 1. So we select the skill 1 in this box. Now skill 1 needs to be upgraded before you can get Hurricane now. Now what level skill 1 needs to be depends on what you put in the next box that shows up. Required skill level. By default it's just at 1, which means if you raise up skill 1 at all, you can then raise up Hurricane. But say we set this to like 3. Now skill 1 needs to be level 3 before you can start putting any points in Hurricane. Alright, but for this tutorial I'm just going to keep it as no skill required just so we can get it working. Alright, and then now time for the effects. To give your skill actual effects, there are 3 tabs, each with their own usages. The first one, active effects, is used for effects that happen when you cast the skill. Casting the skill includes any method that SkillAPI gives you to cast the skill, such as like the command, or binding the skill, or even click combos. So for our skill, we're going to be using these, but I'll explain the other categories first. Passive effects are applied all the time, every couple of seconds, depending on what you set it to. For example, if I add an attack modifier and go back to details, now there's a period option here. This is how frequently it actually applies the effect. By default it's set to 3, you can change it to whatever you want, you can use decimals again. But yeah, for duration effects that are passive, if you want them to last indefinitely, just make sure this duration option in them is higher than that period that showed up. So that way it applies the effect more often than it, like before it can run out again. Alright. Now lastly, there's embed effects. Now these are special effects that only work with effects that apply them. These could be projectile effects, delayed, condition, and a few other ones we'll go over later. But if you add embed effects before you have any of those, it won't show up on the right hand side. Like, say I added damage 1. Over here you see that embed is still empty, even though I added the effect here. But that's because no effect will actually apply it, so it's not actually useful right now. But if I went back to active and added something that does use it, let's say, well, attack modifier is one of those. Now attack modifier shows up along with the damage embed effect. So one way to tell if an effect actually applies embed effects is it will have some text at the bottom of it that says applies embed effects. But basically what embed effects are for is those effects that apply them apply it at certain times. Like projectile effects will apply embed effects when the projectile hits something, whether it be the ground or another target. So those are used for putting effects in other ones. But for now, we're going to use active effects for our current skill because that's all it needs. And the first effect that it has is dealing damage. So to deal damage, let's go down to the damage effect right here. Click on it and then click add mechanic. So now we have a damaging mechanic. The first option is what type of target you want. There are different ways you can target something. Ours is going to be area because that's the area around the caster. But the other options are linear, which is just a straight line in front of the caster. Self, which is the caster itself. Target, which is the enemy the caster is looking at. Or target area, which is the area around the thing that the caster is looking at. So for now we'll just keep it on area for our skill, and then move on to the next one. So target group. This is what sort of target you want. Do you want to attack enemies, allies, anyone except for yourself or everybody. Since we're doing damage and knocking enemies back, we just want to keep this on enemy. The last option is damage. How much damage you want to deal. For this one, I'll keep it around the same damage as a diamond sword to start off, so I'll put it about 7, and then increase by 1 each level. Alright, so now we have our damage. Now the other part of our skill is knocking things back. So this mechanic would be a push, because you're pushing it away from the caster. So I'll go down to push and add the mechanic. Alright, it'll be the same target type and group as our damage, so we hit the same people. And then for the speed, this is how fast we want to knock them back. I'll put that at about 2 and increase by, let's say, a quarter per level. Alright, that'll knock things back and damage them. So we have our effects, but now we can go back to details and finish the new options. So when you add effects, new options will appear depending on what they require. Like radius is used for area effects, because it wants to know how big of an area do you want to affect. For this skill, let's give it a smaller area, about 3, and let's say it increases in size by about a quarter each level. Alright, and that should be it. That should be all that we need for our skill. Now, adding the skill to the class, you simply go back to the class, say we want to add it to fighter, and now it shows up in the class skill list. So just checkmark it, and now it's in the class. It should show up in game, and you should be able to use it. Now we just need to bring all of this data to our server, the same way as we did before. So classes, same as before, just select everything over here, copy it, and paste into this file. Now, since you already have some stuff, you have to delete it first and then paste over it. Now, skills works the same way as classes. You just select everything over here, copy it, and then go to the skills file and paste everything in there. Now once you have that, we should be able to start up the server and see the skill and use it. So let's start up the server. Again, this is using 1.7.2 still. Alright, so I'll just profess as the fighter. Then I'll open up the skills to see that it's actually there. And there it is. There's the iron sword like we selected, and then there's all the stats we chose. Alright, so since it requires level 5, I can't quite get it right now because I'm only level 1 since I just became a fighter. But I'm going to use a command to boost myself up to level 5. And now it says I can unlock it. Alright. So it's basically how you get skills into the game. It's quite simple. And now I guess we'll go over some more effects, since there's plenty to go over. Go over some more of the more specific situations. Alright. So let's go over some of those embed effects. So attack modifier is the first one. This basically works where it gives the targets a buff. Generally this will be yourself, so normally you would take this and go to yourself and make it either ally or all. And it gives the target a buff where on the next auto attack, or auto attacks depending on what you set it to, it will apply embed effects as well. many attacks depends on what you set it to here, like the attacks option, and how long the buff lasts is the duration. If the time runs out or the number of auto attacks has been completed, then the effect will no longer be there. So it's whatever expires first. So that's the first embed usage. The next one is chance. This is an instant embed option where it just rolls a chance, and if it succeeds, it applies embed effects. The chance options here are in percentages, so this 20 would mean it has a 20% chance of happening. Now, for chance, if the roll fails, none of the embed effects will apply, but it will still use the cooldown. So that's one thing to keep in mind when making the skill. So if you want it to have only a chance to do something extra, you want to make sure that you have something that the skill will do, whether it be like something minor or just something that makes the player know that something happened. Alright, next would be condition. Now this is a kind of a weird one where, again, it's another instant one that applies it if the condition is met, but you have a bunch of options here for the condition. Now the condition is for potion effects, being on fire, or the SkillAPI statuses, whether or not they have them. So say we want to do something extra if something's poisoned. So you just select poison, and then it'll apply embed effects when they're poisoned. Now if you want something like poison, or let's say poison or if they're slowed. So you go to this option right here, where it says stop. You select it, and it has a bunch of options for like what sort of operator you want. So since we said poison or slowed, you select or, and then you go to this next option and go down to slow. Alright, so now the embed effects will apply if they were poisoned or slowed. Basically in these operators, stop means it does not look at any of the rest of the options. So like if I put stop back here instead of or, slowness would be completely ignored. Now, and is just both the conditions must be met. It's pretty much just matches up to the operator. If you don't know any of these, you can always look it up on Google, Wikipedia, pretty much anything. It's pretty easy to find. And just use whatever suits what you need. And how these work is it starts with the first one and applies the operator to that one and then the next one. So here would be poison and slowness for the or. And then it makes that the new result. And if you want to add a third one, like down here, let's do and. So this would require poison or slowness, but then it definitely requires stun, because if this first section passes, poison and slowness, then it says, okay, so that's true right now. Now it goes true and stun. So it goes in order. So that's how you would plan out the order of the different conditions. If you need more help with that, there's a page on SkillAPI Bucket Dev page that goes over this a bit more in detail. Alright, the next embed effect is delay. This just applies embed effects after a certain amount of time. This is in seconds and again can use decimal values. Alright, then after that there is projectiles. Again, projectiles are just applying the effects on the target they hit. Now for projectiles, the embed effects, if they are target type or target area, they will apply it to or around the hit enemy. If they are just area, then it'll apply around the area the arrow lands, regardless whether or not it hits something. If you do self, it'll apply it to the launcher of the arrow. Alright, so those are all the options for embed effects that were currently in the tool when I made this video. And then another thing to go through and learn about is all of the different damage options, because some of them might not do exactly what you think they are. Like damage percent is a buff to your attack damage. It increases your attack damage by a percentage. Damage bonus is the same except a flat amount. Damage reduction reduces the amount of damage you are taking by a flat amount. And damage percent reduction is reducing the amount of damage you are taking by a percentage. In case you don't know, DOT is just a damage over time, so it's continuous damage over a set duration. Heal over time is the same thing, just healing over a certain duration. Launching is setting the velocity of something generally upward, so launching things up in the air if you want to, or you could also do like sideways. Mana damage is dealing damage based on the amount of mana the target has. You can do missing mana or how much mana they have. Okay, we'll go look at particles real quick. So when you go to the particle type, there doesn't seem to be many options. There's smoke, ender signal, flames, potion break, and other. But if you go to other, this data value becomes a fairly large list of different particles you can use. Now, these particles use packets, so they might not be as efficient. So whenever you use the other category, don't play too many particles. Like if you play in a small amount, like say one to like anywhere between like 1 and 50, it should be fine. Alright. Now going down the list even more. Pull is pulling things towards you. Pushing is pushing things away. You can add sound effects. Taunt doesn't seem to work right now because the bucket effect doesn't work, so probably shouldn't use that right now. Well, I'm going to work on fixing that. Right, teleport is teleporting yourself somewhere. Well, teleporting the target a certain location. Teleport target is teleporting to the target that you have selected. Alright, those are all the different effects you can use. And depending on what sort of target you chose, different options will appear. Like if we choose a target type, go to details, now there is a range. This is how far away the target can be in order to call them a target. If you make it linear, the range will be how long of a line you want to look at. If you do target area, you get both the range and the radius. Radius for the area around the target, and the range for, again, being the distance away the target can be. Alright, those are pretty much all the effects you need to know about. All of them apply to any of the three categories, except for embed effects. Embed effects cannot apply effects that embed more effects, otherwise you would get an infinite loop. Later on I may add them in here without the embed effects, but for now you just can't add them to the section right now. Alright, and that's how you make skills with the tool. this will be the last tutorial on the dynamic tool. Other tutorials will cover coding your own skills and the related topics like that. So thanks for watching, and I hope it helped.